Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Well, Tony, we got a chance to rewatch Notre Dame's first college football playoff game, which, according to the calendar, and I checked twice, was like 3.5 weeks ago, despite feeling like it was about a year and a half back. One thing, Tony, that did make it feel like, boy, this has obviously been a minute since this game happened. Tony, you remember on the broadcast when Indiana was down 20-3 in the fourth quarter, and boy, that was going to be a referendum on, oh boy, it really makes you question the strength of the Big Ten this year. Tony, do you know what the Big Ten's record against the SEC is since this game happened?
Tom, go ahead and give it to the people.
5-1, Tony.
Oh.
And a bunch of those were in the college football playoff, actually 3 of them. So it was not, yes. South Carolina beat Iowa. But Tony, you really got to ask yourself, did Iowa really want to be there? And frankly, I think the answer is pretty obvious given all of the other results.
Well, you can say 5-1, but we know what would have happened if Alabama had played a Big Ten team other than Michigan. They would have beaten that team, and especially if they were in the playoffs, they would have certainly won there. And Ole Miss would have been fantastic in the playoffs. Georgia probably, if they hadn't been in the playoffs, would have been just fine outside of the playoffs, probably where they belonged. But yes, I don't know what I don't recall any of that conversation happening against in any of Ohio State's games where nobody was saying, gosh, should Oregon have been in this game? Should Tennessee have been in the playoffs? But they sure went after Indiana in that one. It was a long time ago. And I did tweet out a little bit a clip of that as well, just because it was so long ago. But that one came roaring right back once I saw that the ripping on Indiana. Now I did enough fast forwarding between plays that I didn't just listen to the commentary, because that's a fourth quarter I don't need to listen to again.
Yeah, I was very much the same, but it was just you'd catch it here and there, and it's like, boy, Tony, 17-3. Have you ever seen a more lopsided football game in your life? I mean, they keep getting the ball across midfield, and then they bog down. They don't get points. Never in football history has that happened to a team. Not once, ever, especially on the road. My goodness.
It did not feel like, after watching as many playoff games after that, it did not feel like the blowout this time that it seemed at that time, because you're right. They kept making it past midfield, and then, something bad would happen. So let's talk about this game. And I will start. Thank you. Notre Dame rushed for 193 yards in this game on 35 carries, 2 touchdowns, averaged 5.5 yards per carry. And I'm telling you, this is the least impressive 193 yards you'll ever see, because 98 of them came on one play from running back Jeremiyah Love, and the other 95 yards came on 34 carries. So outside of the 98-yarder, they averaged 2.8 yards per carry, which is not great. When you take away that 98-yarder, you can't take it away. When you take away the 1/4 of their yardage from that one play, that was over 1/4 of their yardage, just that one play. Outside of that, they averaged 4.5 yards per play, which is also what they averaged against Penn State. And normally that's not going to be good enough to get you a win. And Jeremiyah Love rushed for 108 yards on those 8 carries. So that would tell you that the carries that did not go 98 yards, the other 7 carries for him went a total of 10 yards, including 7 yards and losses. His carries in this game, -1 yards, 98 yards, -1, -5, 1, 7, 2, 7. And overall, for Notre Dame in this game, they had 9 carries of 0 or negative yardage and 8 carries of 7 or more yards. So they had more carries of nothing or loss than they did of rushes of 7 or more. And so this 193 yards to me is meaningless. The 98-yarder from Jeremiyah Love great run meaningless to me in this game because you're facing an Ohio State defense that has a better run defense, but also if your big thing is a fluke, go ahead and have a 98-yarder in this game. It's not going to be enough. You need a consistent running attack against Ohio State, and based on what we saw here, I don't see it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a concern. And there's so much of this offense that I'm like writing stuff down. I was like, oh, he's not playing in the national championship game. The crucial lead block on that 98-yard touchdown, Jeremiah left, great speed in the open field, very nice run. The key block was from Anthony Knapp, who is not playing in the national championship game because he got hurt against Penn State. And that's going to be a little bit of a common theme. It's like you're writing down these names and you're like, oh, I don't think we're going to see him. And that's going to be kind of a big part of this whole conversation, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate because this is, you watch this team and you can understand for sure how Notre Dame is at the point where they're in the national championship game. This is a really good Notre Dame team that does a lot of stuff that previous Notre Dame teams didn't do, but they're so banged up right now and they don't have the depth on the roster that like an Ohio State does, where they're still, I don't know what they're going to do with the offensive line situation, but the injuries are definitely going to be a big part of the story. And we can talk about some of those guys more later in some detail, but the quarterback, Riley Leonard, he's such a big part of the rushing offense for Notre Dame. He had 11 carries in this game, 30 yards, 2.7 yards per carry, and it was like the most 3 yards per carry you've ever seen. Here was his rushing totals: 4, 3, 1, 6, 6, 0, 8, 7, 1. But it's just the long run, 11 carries, long of 8. That's the Riley Leonard experience. You don't sack him. I mean, even Penn State, when we get to the Penn State game, Penn State, when they sacked him, it was like a loss of 3. Like, it's just the spectrum of outcomes for a Riley Leonard run is like, well, the worst case scenario is like a loss of 4. The best case scenario is like 10. Everything else is just somewhere in the middle. And it's so many 3-yard runs, it feels like, when you're watching him. And it's consistent. It's, I'm sure, just absolutely frustrating if you're watching your team trying to play defense against him, because it feels like if it's 3rd and 2, they're going to run him and they're going to get exactly 2.7 yards and they're going to move the chains, and you're going to see your defense get real annoyed at that. It's not exciting, but it's efficient enough. And I will see how well they run against Ohio State. Indiana had a very good run defense this year as well. And as you said, they had the one big one that they hit, and then outside of that, it really just didn't go anywhere at all. So I don't know how effectively Notre Dame's going to, or how consistently Notre Dame's going to be able to run the ball against Ohio State. If they run it like Texas did, where what did Texas finish with, 60 yards or 80 yards or something like that, and it was like 60, yeah, like, and it was like 2.8 yards per carry or something like that. That's not going to be a winning number for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's going to have to run the ball better than Texas did. And Notre Dame, I like Jeremiah Love. I think he's a really talented running back, and it's a really talented running back room. Maybe that's the next place we should start. Is Jeremiah Love, 98-yard touchdown, as I said, really, really good speed when he gets out in the open field. And he's also really tough to bring down at times. You saw that in the Penn State game where he scored that touchdown. There was one play here where he didn't have a lot of runs, but one where he got like 6 or 7 yards. He broke one tackle, stiff-armed another guy. Like, he's just very tough to bring down in the open field. And Jadarian Price is number 24. He's the number 2 running back. Good quickness off the corner out of him. You see them use him in the passing game. Jeremiah Love, they had them use him in the passing game. And Aeneas Williams, number 20, he's the 3rd running back. Another guy, good quickness. He had another one down by the goal line where he got tackled, but there was a moment where you're like, I don't know if he was down, and it was very much like the Jeremiah Love run against Penn State, where you have got to tackle them to the ground and make sure they are on the ground, and do not, you're not quite driving a spike through their hearts to make sure they're down, but it's like, really make sure, bring some garlic and make sure they really are down, because they do break tackles that you think he's down. He's definitely down. Nope, no, he's not.
Yeah, Jeremiah Love has had some special moments this season. He's a 1,000-yard rusher and still dealing with a knee injury, but Marcus Freeman said he's good to go. He's playing. He's all of that. And but overall, like without the threat of the pass from Riley Leonard, and he was 23 of 32 for 201 yards in this one with a long of 44 yards. Like I think you can kind of focus on stopping the run and let whatever secondary you have back there live and die by manning up and seeing if Riley Leonard can beat you throwing the ball, because I don't think he can. And he threw the ball 32 times in this one, which is the same number of passes that he had against Northern Illinois in a loss. His season high number of passes is 33 against Virginia. So it is interesting that they felt they needed to throw it as much as they did against Indiana, when, maybe I guess they felt that was their best option, or a better option than just running into the teeth of the Indiana defense. But even there, I don't see a lot of skill and dynamic. There's nobody that scares you in the passing game. And Riley Leonard is as liable to throw the ball at a receiver's feet as he is the receiver's hands. And so I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, you take some shots downfield and try to get lucky there, or do you just continue to dink and dunk like they did, 4 targets or 5 targets to Aeneas Williams, the running back. He had 4 catches, for 15 yards. Bo Collins, the receiver tight end, 2 catches for 18 yards. Jeremiah Love, 2 for 18. Tight end Mitchell Evans, 2 for 17. Receiver Jaden Thomas, or maybe tight end Jaden Thomas, 2 for 13. It's very, there's no big numbers. And Jordan Faison, the receiver, 10 targets, 7 catches for 89 yards. That was his best. He was the guy in this one. We saw, we'll get to it eventually in a few days, but Jaden Greathouse had the big reception and touchdown against Penn State on a broken play. But really, I don't think there's anybody that is a concern. Sure, they're all a concern, but there's none of these guys are starting for Ohio State.
Oh, no. I don't know that there's, we watched 3 Georgia games and we thought, okay, here's, sorry, not 3 Georgia games. We watched 3 Texas games. Goodness, we've watched a lot of football the last month, as it turns out. 3 Texas games. And each time it was like, oh, Matthew Golden, he's clearly the best receiver on this team. And you watch this game and you go, oh, Jordan Faison, he's clearly the best receiver on this team. As you said, 7 catches, 89 yards. But those are his career highs in both categories for a single game. He was 4 for 46 in the Georgia game and 2 for 25 in the Notre Dame game. And, Jaden Greathouse had a nice Penn State game, but 1 for 8 in this game. And there's not anyone who you look at and you go, yeah, that dude is going to be a problem. You got a bunch of guys who could make plays, but it feels like, watching Tennessee, Dante Thornton was their deep threat guy. And it was, he was good for a big play game, basically. And we watched 4 Tennessee games, and there's Dante Thornton making plays in every game. And there isn't that guy on this Notre Dame team. And that could be a function of the wide receiver talent. It could also just be Riley Leonard just not that great of a passing quarterback. That's just not really what his game is. And I don't know that I see Notre Dame really breaking tendency and just heaving it deep. We'll watch the next 2 games and see if we see, more of that. But I think I saw 1 real deep shot out of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
There was a deep shot down the right sideline. I think it was towards the end of the first half, maybe, and it was overthrown and incomplete, and not particularly close, and just a lot of screens, a lot of stuff to the backside of the backfield, some crossers, that kind of stuff. And we saw Texas was very effective getting to the ball to the backside of the backfield against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. They scored 2 touchdowns on it. So again, this is not to say that Notre Dame can't move the ball through the air, can't pick up, can't make big plays through the air against Ohio State. I don't think it's going to be easy for them to move the ball in the air against Ohio State. And with, having watched how they ran against Indiana, I don't know how well and how consistently they're going to be able to run the ball against Ohio State, which is probably a slightly better run defense in Indiana. So this just feels, it's a lot like the Texas conversation to me, where we spent 3 games watching Texas going, I don't think they can run the ball, and I don't think their passing game is consistent enough to be able to move the ball. And we both picked Texas to score, 17 points in that game, and said, I don't really see how they get materially over 20 points, and Texas scored 14. And yeah, they got close to getting 21 points. And so if things had gone right, they would have gotten to about the ceiling that we thought. But I feel like we're going to probably, let's see 2 more games, but I feel like we're probably, especially given some of the offensive line question marks, going to be having a lot of the same conversations about Notre Dame that we did about Texas, which I don't know how well they're going to be able to run the ball against Ohio State defense. And I don't know that they're consistent enough in the passing game to be able to throw the ball consistently against the Ohio State defense.
And really, you look at the red zone inefficiency as well. They scored touchdowns on 2 of their 4 red zone opportunities. Notre Dame did. And you can't do that. We saw what happened when Texas didn't capitalize in the red zone. And Ohio State's very, very stout inside the 5, inside the 10. And Notre Dame needs to be able to pound it in there. Now, you would think with a guy like Riley Leonard, who is, you mentioned the Riley Leonard experience, it's kind of like the JT Barrett experience. What Riley Leonard's got, 15 rushing touchdowns, at least as of this game. So they can finish well, but they need to finish well in this one. And I'm not sure that that's an area where I think they're going to do well. And one of my notes in this one is that there's not enough defensive talent for Indiana in this game, because they had some opportunities to make plays and they just weren't good enough to do it. And I think Ohio State will be. And I'm not saying they're going to shut out Notre Dame or anything like that, but the defense that Notre Dame is going to see against Ohio State will be better than the one that they saw against Indiana. And there will be some plays made by Ohio State. And Indiana had 10 tackles for loss in this game. So let's not pretend like they didn't make plays. Notre Dame allows defenses to make plays, and then if you have a defense like Ohio State who does that and then also does more, it could get bad.
Yeah, you could see this being a game where if Notre Dame gets a bunch of 3 and outs, I mean, the path to win for Notre Dame is pretty clear to me, and that is you string together a bunch of 13-play drives and you run 7 minutes off the clock and you limit the possessions, because Ohio State's a more talented team than Notre Dame, and you limit your possessions, you keep the ball away from Ohio State's offense, you're methodical, and then you got to go get 6 when you're in the red zone, because you're not getting to 30 points if you're Notre Dame, but you're not going to get to 24 by kicking field goals. So you got to get, they probably need to score 3 touchdowns, and they need to try to win this game 21-17 or 24-21 or something like that. And they certainly could do that. The talent is there that they could potentially do that, and the defense is good enough that they could potentially do that. But it's like, that's the one path to victory for Notre Dame. Ohio State could win this game 13-10, because I think the defense is going to hold Notre Dame to, not very many points. And Ohio State could win this game just as easily 45 to something, whatever. I think Ohio State could win this game if it's a shootout. Ohio State could win this game if it's a rock fight. Notre Dame kind of needs it to be a rock fight, I think, to win. So, that's going to be, again, there's a way Notre Dame wins this game. Absolutely, there's a way Notre Dame wins this game, but they would have to go real out of character to win this game 38-35. That would require, a remarkable change from at least what we saw here. And, we've obviously watched the Georgia game and watched the Penn State game live, not in the way that we're going to watch them when we're breaking them down, but we've seen it. We know, they dominate the first half against Georgia and they end up with 6 points. You can't do that. If you dominate the first half against Ohio State and you end up with 6 points, congratulations. You're going to be the halftime national champions and you're going to lose the game by 17 points. You're not going to be able to hold Ohio State's offense down forever. So you're going to have to be methodical, drive the ball, have a lot of 3rd and 2s that Riley Leonard's picking up 2.4 yards on. It's not going to be exciting. It's not going to be fun to watch, but that's how Notre Dame wins this game if they're going to win this game. All right, so let's see. What would be a fun thing to talk about? Tony, can I tell you, I apparently haven't been listening super closely on these Notre Dame broadcasts, just sort of watching sort of passively as we're, sitting in the media room at the Rose Bowl or the Cotton Bowl or whatever. Leonard Moore, number 15. Tony, do you know what class he's in? What year he is? Corner for Notre Dame?
Believe he is a true freshman who was playing high school football last year.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that is who he is. Yeah. And Christian Gray is a sophomore, number 29, who I believe set an unofficial NCAA record for most contact on one individual play without drawing a pass interference call. Early in this game when Elijah Surratt, he basically undressed Elijah Surratt, and Surratt caught the ball anyway. And I'm looking and I'm going, a grabby corner who's a sophomore and kind of inexperienced, and a true freshman corner. And Tony, if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would have concerns. Do you remember how you used to see Al Golden sweat when he was the head coach of Miami? Like, I feel like you might see Al Golden stress sweating during this game, looking at a true freshman corner lining up against, take your pick, Jeremiyah Smith or Emeka Ibuka or Carnell Tate. And like, no disrespect, like it's great. Good for Leonard Moore that he is a true freshman on a team that's playing in a national championship game. Indiana's wide receivers, Elijah Surratt's probably the best one, and he's like, fine. Georgia's receivers have cinder blocks for hands. Penn State's receivers, Penn State actually doesn't have receivers. They just decided, you know what? We're going to just slide the slider down to 0. And we're going to use all of our points on the tight end. So I look at that. I look at the corners for Notre Dame, and I look at who they've played, and I'm like, well, yeah, I could see how this has worked for you so far. I don't know that this is going to work for you all that well next Monday night.
You mentioned those two corners. On the official Notre Dame depth chart, the backup for Leonard Moore is Tay Johnson, a true freshman. The backup for Christian Gray is Carson Hobbs, a true freshman. Hobbs is also listed as the backup nickel behind Jordan Clark, who is a graduate, son of Ryan Clark from ESPN and the former Steelers safety. So, yes, it's a young group, and we've seen, and you just did a Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning with Ross Fulton about, can Notre Dame do what Texas did and lock down Jeremiyah Smith? And the thing is, they do what they do, and you've got a young crew, and it's hard to ask them to do what they don't do. And I wasn't I'm watching this, and I thought both Moore and Gray had some good moments. Certainly Gray got away with some things, but he is there. Like he's there in coverage. Leonard Moore as well. But overall, this is a completely different animal. And you look at the success that USC had throwing the ball. They threw for 360 yards on Notre Dame when they played. I think Louisville threw for 280 or 290 on them. So Ohio State, I would say, is commensurate to a Louisville passing game, if you will. But yeah, this is going to be a very new experience for those corners. Sure, they're talented. They're Christian Gray, Ohio State recruited him a while back. Leonard Moore is listed at 6'2". These guys are long, athletic guys, but they're going against robots, and robots that are designed to kill. And so, good luck. This is another area where Ohio State has an advantage over the Irish, and it's going to take everybody in the secondary, but also everybody up front to make this a non-huge advantage for Ohio State. They got to get to Will Howard and create some messes at the line of scrimmage, and then also change the pictures however they can for him, because you're asking these young corners a lot.
Yeah, you're asking a lot out of those guys. And when you looked at Texas's corners, it was they have the literal Thorpe Award winner on one side of the field, and that was Jahdae Barron. And then you looked at Malik Muhammad, and you're like, yeah, they'll be able to pick on that guy. He's not bad. He's I think he was a redshirt sophomore maybe. And it was like, he's not bad, but they'll be able to go after him some. And they went after him some, and they had some success, and they drew at least one pass interference call. I look at this and it's like, these guys, what's the best wide receiver core that Notre Dame has faced this year? Is it USC? Is it Louisville? I mean, this has the possibility of being a baptism by fire. And the deeper in the Notre Dame secondary, like Xavier Watts is great. Xavier Watts, number 0 safety, is like very impressive. Like him a lot. They need like 3 more of him, and they don't have 3 more of him. And that feels like that's going to be a problem. Like Xavier Watts in this game had 10 tackles, had an interception, had a tackle for loss. I mean, he was all over the place, and he was great. And he had like a diving interception in the goal line. This was not Curtis Rourke's finest moment. Like, it was, some of it was, Notre Dame had a pass rush and got in his face, and so you give Notre Dame credit for some of it, but also some of it was, it looked like he forgot how to play football, which again is probably partially Notre Dame, but there are open receivers and he's just missing open receivers, and that's not really Notre Dame, because it wasn't like, oh, he was getting drilled as he threw it. It just, no, he just missed open receivers. So, I think this might be a game where when they talk about, you see a guy in the field and he's faster than it looks like on film. I think this might be an offense that's faster and bigger and better than it looks like it is on film. And the problem that Notre Dame may run into is, if you have a Ohio State, Tennessee kind of start to the game, or an Ohio State, Oregon start to the game, where, Ohio State's up by 14 points. Walk me through the scenario where Notre Dame comes back and wins the game if they're down 14 points. Because I think the defense is going to continue to have some issues, and the offense is absolutely not built to come from behind. That feels like, if Notre Dame's down 14 points, that feels like you're much more likely to end up with like I don't know, what did the 2012 Alabama Notre Dame game end up, 42-14 or something? Like, it feels like you're much more likely to end up with that kind of outcome than Notre Dame comes back and it's a 21-17 game one way or the other. That all again presupposes that Ohio State gets out to a fast start, but I think you have the possibility of Ohio State getting out to a fast start as Notre Dame adjusts, because, as you said, I talked to Ross Fulton, who's our X's and O's guy, and there's a whole show on that. Just search Ross Fulton analysis on YouTube and you can find that. But the short version is, Texas did a bunch of stuff with cover 2, and that's just not what Notre Dame does. Notre Dame does, cover 1, play a bunch of cover 3. Like, they'll play some cover 2, but it's 5-10% of their coverages. It's just not that much. And with a very young secondary, you've got so much stuff. These are not guys who have 4 years of college that they can lean back on and rely on. Hey, yeah, we've seen this, we've seen that. This is, you said the word true freshman an awful lot there in that corner conversation. And Gray is a sophomore. These are not guys who have 4 years of experience like the Ohio State secondary does. I don't think they're going to be able to just, build a cover 2. We'll just Control C, Control V the Texas game plan from scratch. You can't just do that from scratch. So that, now you've got Notre Dame plays a lot of man. Playing man has not gone great for teams covering Ohio State this postseason. It feels like this is not a great matchup for the Notre Dame secondary, both personnel wise and schematically.
Marcus Freeman even said it on Sunday, talking about playing man. He's like, that's what we do, but Ohio State does very well against that. So you've got to figure out some sort of a happy medium in there. And as I'm watching this, you mentioned Xavier Watts. Even his interception was like an overthrow from just a bad throw from Curtis Rourke. And it's not like Watts was in a position to make a play. The ball just came to him. Like, I don't know that anybody really jumped out at me in this one that applies to the game against Ohio State. Defensive tackle Riley Mills, this is the game where he got injured. His knee is injured. So like, he's not really part of the plans, but Watts, certainly an experienced guy. I think I wrote down notice like linebacker Jaden Osbury, who is listed as the number 2 linebacker. You saw defensive end Logan Thomas get a sack, but he's a true freshman. He's like a backup. Like, there weren't a lot of guys just jumping out at me, and I don't know if it's because Indiana maybe they weren't on the field enough. Although I will say, I was surprised. I've forgotten how successful Indiana was kind of running the ball at times. Both of their running backs averaged 3.4 yards per carry, which isn't great, but apply that, the exchange rate between Indiana running it and Ohio State running it might be a little higher. So it was surprising that they were able to have some success just right up the middle against Notre Dame and in between the tackles on some of those RPO runs and some of the RPO throws where Rourke got them at times, but also just wasn't as accurate as he needed to be. But overall, nobody really jumped out. There weren't many people jumping out for me on the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, there were a couple names I wrote down, but it's like I wrote down like, oh, this was a nice play, and it wasn't. I have 4 other notes about other nice plays, like Junior Tuialamaka, who's at number 44, a defensive end, had a really nice inside pass rush and broke up tipped a pass, broke up a pass with a nice inside move. Drake Bowen, number 34, linebacker, blew up a screen at one point. Jordan Clark, number 1, who's a safety who transferred from Arizona State, had a nice TFL on a run play. But it's like, oh yeah, this guy made this one nice play. Howard Cross, number 56, son of former New York Giant Howard Cross. This is another one of these, like, I remember watching your dad play. This is not cool that he has a college age son now. He had a couple nice plays. He's been banged up. They got him back. Bryce Young, number 30. This is another son of a former NFL player, Bryant Young's son. True freshman edge rusher. He had a sack in the third quarter that was like, oh, that was a nice play. But again, it's like one play. One thing that does not make me feel old, which is great. Big fan, Tony, of Eddie Goins, the kickoff guy for Notre Dame, number 90. They said that he kicks the ball off. He goes, they said he's 30 years old. And I was like, yes, my man. Let's go watch Matlock together at Media Day. Let's do that. This is going to be fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you that Joshua Burnham, number 40, defensive end. He had like a nice play. It's just Riley Mills was the guy watching this game that like really jumped out to you. It's like, boy, he's just all over the place. He drew a holding call or two out of Carter Smith, who was the left tackle for Indiana. You noticed Riley Mills a bunch in the first half. I had a bunch of notes, and it was like, this is really sad because I know how this is going to end, and it's going to end sooner than you think. But, he was such an impactful guy. It feels like losing him is, that's going to be a loss that I think they're going to have a lot of trouble making up. And when you look at Ohio State's offense, the way they've played 3 really good defensive lines the last 3 games. Tennessee had a really good defensive line. James Pierce, edge rusher, probably a first-round pick. Oregon had a really good defensive line. You got Derek Harmon, Jamari Caldwell in the middle, Mateo Uiagalelei off the edge. I mean, you've got plenty of talent there. And then Texas had maybe the best defensive line they've faced. And then it just feels like this is going to be like, well, and Notre Dame's got some guys and they're, they'll make a play every once in a while, but we've watched 3 really good defensive lines in a row. And we've watched Ohio State's defensive line been dominant 3 games in a row. And then you watch Notre Dame and it's like, yeah, they're fine. They're not bad, but they're fine. And it feels like you've got to have a secondary that's like a real lockdown secondary. You've got to have a really dominant defensive line. And I have some concerns about Notre Dame minus Riley Mills. And again, we've seen the Georgia game. We know they play a good, solid game against Georgia. We know they do a decent job against Penn State. But it feels like this is just, if the last 3 opponents have been up here, Notre Dame's like they're not bad. They're just not quite as good. And Ohio State's been reasonably effective against the teams that seem like they're better than Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what we learn from these next games and see if these names keep popping up. You mentioned like a Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Logan Thomas, those guys that kind of flash. Do they continue to do that? Does the light stay on? Is it a sustained brightness that we see from them? We will see. A couple of other last things from me, Tom. Some interesting special teams going on. Notre Dame was kicking it short purposefully to try to encourage some returns. I don't know that Ohio State would take them up on that based on their lack of ability to return kicks. There was the reverse on the opening kickoff in the second half for Notre Dame. They ran a reverse on that and picked up about 50 yards or so. And there's a missed tackle there that led to a big gain. And Indiana blocked a field goal in this one. So there's some special teams to keep an eye on. And I would expect more passes batted down at the line of scrimmage from Riley Leonard. We're going to see that. You're going to see the Ohio State defensive line. The initial pass rush is going to be there. Then they're just going to stand back and then bat the ball down and wait for that. And the last thing for me, Tom, I guess, do you know what they're calling the 98-yard touchdown run in Notre Dame? They are calling it
I do not know.
98 yards through the heart of Redenbacher country. It's on all the shirts. It's amazing.
I'm not sure whether it would make me matter if that was true or whether you made it up. I'm pretty sure you're making it up, but I can't be 100% sure on that. I had a note that there were a couple of issues with the center, Pat Coogan. He had one where he snapped on one where everyone else was pretty clearly on two. There was another one where there was a real high snap that threw the play timing off. And that's just one of those things where it wasn't a consistent issue, but it's one of those things where when you see it in one game, it's like, okay, I got to watch the next game and see if I see this again. If it was this a one-off or was this is this potentially a recurring thing? Because Notre Dame does not have the luxury of throwing away a play or throwing away a drive on, hey, now we're behind the sticks and now instead of 2nd and 7, it's 2nd and 12. Like, no, you cannot do that against this Ohio State defense. So we'll watch the next couple and see that. Indiana, the way Indiana runs the ball, they run stretch a lot, which is not something you've seen a lot from Ohio State this year. So I don't know, Indiana's kind of gashing them at times on the ground. And it was like, I don't know how much this really means other than just sort of a personnel thing. Schematically, it's not really a great analog to what Ohio State does. Watching Notre Dame pull some chicanery on special teams, and they had a fake field goal that didn't work, but it was an interesting formation. Worth noting, during the Texas game, one of the up guys on punts for Texas wore number 16, and Ohio State was very concerned because Arch Manning also wore number 16. So it was like you could swap in the backup quarterback for that. Notre Dame's holder is Chris Salerno. He wears number 26. Tyler Buckner, who is a wide receiver, but who used to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback, also wears number 26. So that's something to keep in mind. Which number 26 is in the game? Mitch Jeter had a terrible regular season. Notre Dame was 8 for 18 on field goals in the regular season. He had one field goal blocked in this game, but has otherwise been 7 for 7 in the college football playoff. He had an injury, like a groin injury earlier in the year. It seems like that was probably the issue. He's been pretty good. Hit the game winner, obviously, against Penn State. Finally, Tony, it is a trip to scroll through this Notre Dame roster. It's just like, oh, yeah, like Brennan Vernon, number 17. Remember Brennan Vernon, defensive lineman from Mentor, who, people were talking about as like the third Bosa brother kind of thing. And this is his second year. They're moving him inside, so he has not really had an impact yet, but he's on this team. I was looking at Bo Collins, obviously we talked about earlier, who was someone who Ohio State recruited out of high school, went to Clemson, now at Notre Dame. Jabron Payne was a running back out of Cincinnati. They kind of travel in the same circles on the recruiting trail to a certain degree. CJ Carr, forgot about CJ Carr, true freshman. He might be their starter next year. But you just kind of go through the list and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And Tyler Buckner mentioned earlier, Kingston Viliamuasa, the linebacker, true freshman, who Ohio State thought they were going to get and then didn't get. There is, Tony, a Tommy Paulus on the roster, which I have to assume is his son of former Notre Dame quarterback Ron Paulus. Tommy Paulus, a linebacker. Tony, I'm going to predict him to win 3 Butkus Awards. Your thoughts?
Oh, wow. But that's impressive. I would have stopped at 2, but you went the full Beano. You did not mention right tackle Emil Wagner from Ohio, that Ohio State led in recruiting. And he is, Tom, he will be the only offensive lineman to start every game for Notre Dame this year, because all 3 of their interior guys, the guys that started like the first 3 or 4 games, are not the guys starting now. So they've had to undergo some changes as well. And also, Tom, one of their backup safeties, true freshman, Kennedy Urlacher.
Oh man,
That's right. I'm going to guess
Kennedys. of the Massachusetts Kennedys and the New Mexico Urlachers. Yeah, I'm going to guess probably some relation there. One thing, Emil Wagner at the right tackle. This is the Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark. I didn't write down his name at all because the last three teams, we watched the first game of the team, and I was like, oh, that right tackle is going to be a problem, and that right tackle was a problem in all three of those games. We'll see how it looks the next couple games because again, we've watched them, but we haven't watched them. We'll see how he looks against Georgia and against Penn State, but that's something that is, if you're looking for something to be encouraged about for Notre Dame, that's a spot that we've kind of pointed at and just made grunting noises because it's like, oh man, oh. And that's not the case after one watch here. We'll see what it looks like after games 2 and 3, but that's something that I would mark down as a positive sign potentially for Notre Dame.
Yeah. And one last one, Tom. Devin Ford plays for this team as well. Former Penn State running back from way back when. Another name from the past. So there you go. Our first rewatch of a Notre Dame game. This one, the game against Indiana. Up next, let me see if I can get this correct, Tom. It will be Georgia, and then it will be Penn State.
Yes.
Boom. Got it. Georgia seems like forever ago, and that was also almost 2 weeks ago from the time we were recording this one. So there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up. We would appreciate that. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, do so. And as always, hit that bell to be notified when we drop videos like this one or go live, which we are fixing to do. We will head to Atlanta on Friday, and we will be there throughout. So now is a great time to join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. We will be talking about this game and everything that happens afterwards for a long time. And we will also be talking about the roster, the portal, all of these good things, because college football never, ever, ever stops. And we are there talking about it on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.